I'll tell you what's a slightly different story in America. As we said, the latest non-farm payrolls data came out on Friday. It shows the US job market, well, it's roaring back, and especially for manufacturing. You could almost say that they're making America great again.
While there is a new push to bring manufacturing jobs back here to the U.S., since 1979, nearly 7 million manufacturing jobs in the U.S. have disappeared. That's around 300,000 jobs every single year.
In 1979, the peak year for manufacturing jobs in the U.S., over 19 million Americans were employed in the sector. By November 2021, this figure had fallen by nearly 36% to just 12.5 million. During the same period, the number of non-farm employees increased by more than 65%. Several factors contribute to this trend. Manufacturing has evolved into a more sophisticated industry that increasingly requires employees with higher education and professional certifications. Over the past 5 decades, industries not well suited to the U.S. economy, such as labor-intensive, low-wage manufacturing in textiles or furniture, have moved offshore. However, recent U.S. industrial policies are aiming to revive domestic manufacturing. Industrial policy involves the government using legal or fiscal measures to promote the production of certain goods it deems necessary. Recent legislations, including the CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act, represent over $1 trillion in government spending aimed at boosting industrial sectors. However, not all economists agree with the government playing a role in market dynamics. Critics argue that government intervention often results in inefficiencies by attempting to pick market winners. Despite these concerns, the U.S. government has a history of intervening in the market, dating back to policies initiated by Alexander Hamilton to strengthen domestic production through protective tariffs. Currently, government incentives are a significant factor encouraging manufacturers to return to the U.S., according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. These incentives, particularly those targeting electric vehicles and semiconductors, aim to make domestic production more economically viable through mechanisms like tax credits, as seen in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Since its implementation, the Treasury Department reports that the policy has spurred at least $45 billion in private sector investments across various supply chains. The tax credits for electric vehicles, EVs, include $7,500 for each new car purchased and an additional $4,000 credit for each used EV sold. Manufacturing in the U.S. is not significantly more expensive than in countries like China, making domestic production more profitable than importing. These substantial incentives have played a key role. Additionally, the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 allocated $50 billion to enhance U.S. capabilities in semiconductor production, drawing over $210 billion in private investments from 22 states. The U.S. produces a considerable number of semiconductors but relies heavily on a few external sources, particularly Taiwan. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the critical role of semiconductors in both advanced and consumer goods manufacturing, emphasizing the need for uninterrupted supply chains. This dependency is so crucial that all major U.S. defense systems require semiconductors to operate, leading the Biden administration to prioritize the domestic production of semiconductors as a national security concern. There is a theoretical justification for industrial policy, especially for technologies related to national security, as free markets often overlook these aspects. The Department of Defense alone cannot guarantee sufficient domestic production. If successful, such policies could yield significant returns, as seen with the space industry, which has benefited commercially from public investments in space science. Similarly, the development of mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, funded and incentivized by the government, proved highly valuable despite the high costs. However, there are also strong arguments against such policies. Politicians and bureaucrats may not be the best judges of market winners due to the sheer complexity of the real economy, which involves millions of people and transactions daily. The relevance of what is considered strategic can shift quickly. For instance, the current heavy focus on electric vehicles might risk advancing a technology that isn't fully mature, potentially overlooking alternative technologies that could prove superior. Industrial policies often reflect the biases of the politicians involved, passing through a political process susceptible to influence from interest groups and lobbyists, which can corrupt the intent of such policies. Examples include the placement of the Micron plant in New York, the home state of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and the Intel plant in Ohio, a key state in presidential elections, raising concerns about projects being initiated for political rather than strategic commercial reasons. Critics also highlight the hidden costs of government intervention, where favoring one sector may inadvertently harm another. For example, while investing in electrification and EV batteries is essential, it shouldn't come at the expense of penalizing other energy forms through regulatory measures. Ultimately, critics argue that it is not the government's role to determine market winners and losers. They believe that if the right market-based policies are implemented to make investment and production in the US both affordable and attractive, the market itself will identify the most viable industries. Now, if you like this video, check out this next video right here.